All right, welcome back. This will be the last segment talking about diet. Basically, it's a brief introduction to how to figure out the perfect diet for you. And we discussed macronutrients, protein, fats, and carbs, and balancing out those ratios depending on your oxidative type. The oxidative system, that's the system that burns protein, fat, and carbs as fuel in the cells to provide energy so that the cells can do their job and you can be healthy. Certainly that would make you healthy. And so this idea of producing energy at the right rate, quality, quantity, very, very important. And people are genetically either a fast oxidizer, slow oxidizer, or somewhere in between. And as we said, we actually have extreme fast oxidizers and a few extreme slow oxidizers. And they would need even more richer kinds of protein and fat, maybe even just a lot more fat. And then on the other side, carbohydrates. Some people would do very well with vegetables, and others can actually do some fruit, and there's kind of the extreme end there too. So that's close enough for now. We talked about having a plate of food and then dividing it up. If you don't know whether you're fast or slow, you could find out real quick by doing a diet of, say, 50-50 on a plate. You'd figure out 50% protein, fat, 50% carbs, and you'd see whether you have the right amount of energy, whether you have a feeling of well-being, and whether you feel satisfied from that meal. And if it fills you up and you got lots of energy and you're not craving anything and you have a sense of well-being, it's a pretty good indication that that's the right meal for you. And of course, at some point you're going to get hungry and you're going to want to eat the same meal again. As long as it did real well for you in there, that'd be a good thing. And that's if that 50-50 was good for you. Now, if you don't feel satiated, if you don't feel the energy, if you don't feel a sense of well-being, then it's not right for you and you need to change it. And you might just go more towards the protein and fat and see how that works out. Do 75% protein, fat, and only 25% carbohydrates. And you'd know real quick if you're moving in the right direction. And all you got to do is move in the right direction. And like we said, kind of a radio dial, you would dial that in and you'd have a pretty good idea then that you're a fast oxidizer and a protein type, or the opposite, whatever it might be. Now that's called the oxidative system or the oxidative rate. And that's simply just how energy is produced in the body. 95% of all your energy in the body is produced through that oxidative system. Now, we also discussed the autonomic nervous system, how that controls a lot of activity in your body too. What you might say is it actually controls the distribution of that energy. And we have two main branches of the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And the same way that some people are just genetically fast oxidizers, like we said, the Eskimos and Native American Indians, pretty darn fast oxidizers, They lived an awful lot on the organ meats of buffalo and other animals, and very rich, dense foods, and not so much on the carb side. So just like people are coming to us genetically programmed that way, they're coming to us with a dominance, sympathetic or parasympathetic. We said these are kind of the A personalities. These people just tend to be more laid back. We say rest and digest types. They're the feed and breed types. And so you would be able to kind of distinguish in different ways whether you're sympathetic dominant, and you could sort of guess. And then you would want to avoid the foods that stimulate the sympathetic nervous system. And as I said, we have some knowledge of this. And so if you're, like we said, let's say you're just automatically kind of a sympathetic type, then you're going to want to stimulate the parasympathetic. Eat the foods that stimulate this parasympathetic and bring yourself into balance. And so it matters not only that you get energy being produced in your cells at the right rate, the right quality, and the right quantity of energy on a cellular level, which would translate into those organs are working pretty good, those systems are working pretty good, wherever those cells are. And that would be a good thing. It's also really important in terms of distribution of that energy. There's a lot of things the sympathetic nervous system control and the parasympathetic nervous system control automatically. We went through that in a previous little video. So it's also very, very important that you get your autonomic nervous system balanced out at all times, if possible. And I might just add a little note here that even parasympathetic dominance, like me, very much the laid-back kind of person, it doesn't mean that we don't get sympathetic. I mean, if someone cuts me off in traffic, I get just as sympathetic, just as much into the fight-flight, as anyone else. And we know sympathetic types, well, obviously there's times when they would get more into the rest digest. I mean, they digest their food too. And they breed and all these sorts of things. So I'm just saying there's a dominance. And there's something else really critical that you need to know about. And then I'll wrap it up and you can make some decisions about what you want to do. We know this needs to be balanced and we know this needs to be balanced. And my good buddy Bill Wolcott, who again is the father and leader of the metabolic typing system, which is the science behind this, he has discovered that there's actually another kind of dominance you might have. Some people are just basically controlled, their food requirements are controlled by getting this right. And other people are just dominated, their food requirements are dominated by getting this right. So we'd call you the autonomic type, autonomic dominant type, or we would call it the oxidative type. And that's another important thing to figure out. Whether your food needs are basically being dictated by the oxidative system. Just, man, if you just are a fast oxidizer through and through, you're going to have to eat this way. I mean, that's just your primary number one concern. But there are people who that's important, but it's not as important. They're basically more autonomic types. In other words, the trick for them is to balance out this system. And so what I would recommend you do, rather than a whole lot of experimentation with first getting, the amount of protein and fat versus carbs, you can get that all balanced out. And that's always a good thing to do. You can also experiment with which proteins and fats. You could see whether white meat works better than dark meat. You could see whether white meat works better than steak. And then if you find that, steak works better, that's a richer type of meat. We call it high purine. There's some, again, the science of this is metabolic typing. If you go from white meat, say, white meat, it does pretty good, but the darker meats are even better. Well, then you might even go even more into the organ meats because they're even richer and just a different kind of a thing. And so you'd find out that, one worked better than another. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is an awful lot of work to figure out if I'm a fast or slow oxidizer. And then I got to figure out if I'm a sympathetic or parasympathetic dominant. And then I got to figure out if I'm an oxidative type or an autonomic type. And you're right, that would be an awful lot of work. Even though I've given you some clues about exactly how you could do it. There's another way. And wouldn't it be great if you could get all of this information in one place by simply filling out a fairly complex but a very interesting questionnaire. And the truth is you can. So if you want to get this test done, we call it the metabolic typing test, and all you would have to do is go to fdnselfcare.com. I'll just type it out for you here. FDN selfcare.com. go to fdnselfcare.com, fill out the questionnaire there, click the send button, and we'll go ahead and give you a free consultation, discuss your diet needs and other health needs that you might have. And that's all you got to do. So thanks a lot for listening to my 4-part series on the diet and metabolic typing diet in particular. And I look forward to working with you if that's your desire.